A number of people have sent me this video since last week asking me to speak on it. And so I was going to talk about it today. All right, let's get into this. I don't even know what to say. Let's just listen to it. Once we're done listening to it, I'll now respond. It's an older person who just for some reason hasn't shown that wisdom comes with age. And it's a shame. Please take a listen.
It was a group of young majors. Among them were Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, and other ethnic nationalities. But the two prominent groups were Igbo and Yoruba. Of course, it's also understandable because the Igbo and Yoruba dominated the officer corps in the military. Because of why? Their early acceptance, I've told you that the North was more reluctant.
Sorry, I should say this. So I want to move to the topic now, but I want to use this to pivot, right? I'm not sure I can stomach everything because it's mostly rubbish, but we'll respond to it once it's done. Take a listen, please.
It was a group of young majors. Among them were Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, and other ethnic nationalities. But the two prominent groups were Igbo and Yoruba. Of course, it's also understandable because the Igbo and Yoruba dominated the officer corps in the military. Because of why? Their early acceptance, I've told you that the North was more reluctant to accept Western education. They preferred Islamic education. And since the world was seen in the eye of the West as the ruler, they had a better placement in the bureaucracy.
Yes. So, and in the military, it was more about qualification that time,
yes,
not about
yes. It was British at the time. They were as much as possible being objective in looking for the military brass. But in the other ranks, the North had more. Yes, the other ranks, the officer cadre had more of those more educated. But the other ranks, the North was more because the level to be admitted was lower. They had more people who were willing to join
than people from the
South, because the South also, they had their businesses, education, businesses, and entrepreneurship, and they were in the bureaucracy and commanding heights of the economy and the bureaucracy. So the more educationally oriented, but because of the way the North was structured, it was easier for people to enter the army and the military forces. So there was a higher percentage of northern soldiers, the other ranks, as against the higher percentage of the officer rank from the south. All right. So as I said, the predominant planners were Western and Eastern soldiers. Read the story of Ademoyega and all the people who were in the coup. They will tell you it was a pan-Nigeria coup. However, when it was executed, because they had planned to take over government, kill or remove the premiers, Adubelo, Okpara, and Kintola, who was premier of the West then. And I think they even planned to kill Zik. But Zik was a wizard, a witch. He left the country before. Nobody knows what happened, but he left the country, handed over the country to the president of the Senate, who was Orizu, Senator Orizu. So he left the country when the coup happened. So he wasn't there, so they couldn't have gotten him. However, the truth must be told, certain people didn't play the roles they were asked to play effectively, and other circumstances that interrupted the coup. So Ahmadu Bello was killed, who was the premier of the North. Tafawa Balewa was killed, who was the prime minister, the all Northerners. In the southwest, Akintola, who was premier, was killed. Of course, Awolowo was already in prison now because he had been in prison for planning to overthrow Tafawa Balewa's government. The justification is not what I'm about to discuss. You come to the southwest, even midwest, Oketiebu, who was the minister of finance, was killed. Some Northern Army generals, officers like Mai Malari and a few of them were killed. But the East, the governor or the prime minister, the premier then Okpara was not killed. The governor Abia was not killed when the coup was carried in 1966. Even though the truth must be told, it was the same Igbo who counter the coup. Who made the coup to fail?
It was Iransi.
Not even Iransi, including Odimegwu Ojukwu, who was commanding the battalion in Kano. He resisted Nzogwu. Nzogwu was coordinating activities in the north from Kaduna. That was where he was successfully able to kill Ahmadu Bello, and because Ahmadu Bello lived in the north, lived in Kaduna. So when he wanted to connect to Kano, Ojukwu resisted. Ojukwu was commanding the battalion in Kano. So they truncated Nzogwu's activity in the north. In the south area, some of the people, especially one man called Major Ifajuna, didn't get his act together. So he missed some of his targets. In the southeast, there was a problem. The American ambassador was visiting the southeast at this time.
Okay.
And therefore, he was staying with the premier of the southeast in Enugu. So the soldiers couldn't have the infantry to storm the government house to take out Okpara, because it would have been seen as an attack on the American ambassador who was hosting. He could have been wounded, or any of his American could have been wounded. And nobody was willing to take that risk. At least they were not willing, because that could lead to
a global affair.
America invading Nigeria. So in all that imponderable, the coup failed.
Okay.
And the leader of the officer then, who was in Lagos, which was Ironsi, was the at that time chief of staff of the Nigerian army, was now invited by this president of the Senate, Rizu, to come and take over the government, because the government was in disarray. Some ministers had been killed, the prime minister had been killed, and there was no coordination, because the coup didn't succeed as it was expected. There was nobody that came out to take. Nzogwu made his broadcast from.
Most of what you just heard right now is hogwash, arrant nonsense. The only painful thing is that it was an elderly person saying it, but regardless of the person's age, it was rubbish. Absolute nonsense. If you're from the southeast, you need prayers. My heart breaks for you guys. These are your leaders. These are your leaders. And as I was talking, I was making notes. Now that it's done, I'm not wondering, where do I even begin? Where do I even begin? Let me say it this way. The first thing that I want Nigerians to understand is this. When you hear young people constituting nuisance all over social media and in real life talking rubbish, they learned it from their elders. These are the elders. This is not the only one. We've listened to some. This one just happens to be quite interesting. This is what I think we should do. Maybe not today. We'll take it bit by bit. You will say something, I'll respond. You say something, I'll respond. That's the only way we can do this. But let me just address some things. He said Azikiwe was a wizard, and that's how he ran away from Nigeria. Really. He was a wizard. Do you know when Azikiwe left Nigeria? Guys, Azikiwe left Nigeria in October of 65. Please ask me when he returned. Now, I have a new name for Azikiwe, and I'm not disrespecting him. I'm just doing exactly what this man said. Going forward, I'll be calling him Zik the Wiz. I love it. Be like animation, be like character for action film. I'm the actor for this action film. Am I? Zik the Wiz is a wizard. He left in October of 65. He did not return to Nigeria until February of 66 because he was a wizard. This is an elder. The man started with, let me see if I think I wrote it down. Oh, I'm not sure. When I say on my show, I'm just wondering, young people listen to these people. Young people listen to these elders. Our problem in Nigeria are people who believe lies to the point where they pass it on to the next generation like heirloom. They have nothing else to give their children but lies. And let me say something. For propaganda to work, you need a modicum, like a measure of truth, or else it will be too apparent. There's a measure of truth. And the only measure of truth in the entire rubbish he said, again, I make no apologies for this, and it's painful. It's painful because, I hope you can see my heart. It's painful because young people believe this rubbish. People think they are hated because they hear old men like this, and they assume that if you are old, you know how it is now. If you are old, we expect wisdom. So naturally, we defer to you. I'm not angry because he's lying. Of course, he's talking rubbish. But because young people listen to these things. Number one, he said young majors, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, and all other ethnic groups were involved in the coup. It's a lie. It's a lie. He said Igbos, Yorubas, Hausas. I wish I'm going to have another session. We'll take it one by one. We'll listen to it and I'll be responding because I cannot. Dear. He said your young majors, Yorubas, Igbos, and Hausas were the ones that planned the coup. He said all other ethnic groups planned the coup. The man is a liar. I don't care who he is, he's lying. And I will explain. Then he said, go and read the book by Adewale Ademoyega. I've said something, I don't know if you guys remember. Every time you speak to an Igbo man, if he discovers that you're Yoruba and he wants to tell you about the coup, he will tell you to go and read a book called Why We Struck. I was told this thing a few days ago. I told the person, I think I read this book more times than he thought, and so he's not the one that will be telling me what was inside. This book, they will tell you to go and read the book. They're not telling you to read the book because of the title. They're telling you to read the book because of the author. Where's his name? Here. Adewale Ademoyega. The name is Yoruba. They mention that name not because they have read the book. They mention the book because they know the name is Yoruba. And they think that if Yoruba write something, that means that you cannot ask me any questions. Adewale Ademoyega listed the names of those who planned the coup. He didn't mention any Hausa. There were no other ethnic groups. There were Igbos and it was the only Yoruba, and he wrote it there. And even the way the coup was planned, he was wrong. And I've said it before. Somebody asked me about an author here the other day. Any author who tells you don't believe the special branch report of April 1966 is a liar. And there are many. Babatunde, what is your name? Two Yoruba and other Igbos and that type, but there were no two Yoruba people. There was only one. Please, I beg in the name of God. The fact I just listened to this video and I waited and I just calmed down, it's a lot of work for me. Don't start in the comment section. I beg you. If you don't know, just leave it alone. Okay, you know what? Let's play a game. Give us the names of the two Yoruba people that were there. Babatunde. Give us the names of the two Yoruba people that were there. And your name is Babatunde. Hey, then you can't wait. He said there were Yorubas, Hausas, and Igbos. He will say, how would he say Banjo? Banjo was actually working with what's the name of the one that destroyed everything? Ironsi. Banjo was with Ironsi. It was in Lagos, trying to fix things. By the way, we'll come to Banjo later. It was only one man, and he talked about how they planned the coup. And he talked about the fact that they've been friends for years, and they eventually came together and they planned it. And he mentioned three names again and again: himself, Ifajuna, and Nzogu. Because those were the people that he was, and then he mentioned Okafo when they were planning the coup, and Chukwuka. But here's the crazy part, and I've said it before. If you read the special branch report of April 66, it was, by the way, I've said several times, that document is one of the most important documents if you want to understand the coup. It was published by the Nigerian police, after interrogating 200 people that were involved in that coup, both the planners and those who helped them with the execution and so on and so forth, and even some of the civilians that were part of it. They interrogated all of them and produced a document. It's in that document that we discover that even what this man says about the fact that he was one of the king that they really planned it, he didn't even understand or know that he came in at the time they invited him. He was the last person to be invited. And they gave him a job. And I thought about that thing today. I was working, I thought about it. And I was like, wait, oh, these guys were smart. Do you know the job they gave Adewale Ademoyega? Broadcast. He was supposed to broadcast what was happening. What do you think would have happened? I thought about it. Was it today or yesterday? I was like, these guys were smart. Nzogu broadcast the stuff in the north, Radio Kaduna, and since 1966 up until today, everybody says it was an Nzogu coup, even though it was not Nzogu. Nzogu was not the one that planned it, but it was the media, it was the face of the coup, because it was one that went on the radio, on media, to say things, right? And everybody calls it Nzogu coup. Imagine if it was Adewale Ademoyega speaking in Lagos, in NBC Lagos, just like that one spoke in Kaduna. What do you think would have happened? A Yoruba man planned the coup. When you say Nzogu coup, you'll be saying Ademoyega coup today. These guys were good. That was his job. They were not. He's not even what he said he was planning. What really happened was this. It was, God bless you, Oguntoye. He was supposed to be the fall guy. You know what? He said we should read Adewale Ademoyega. Let's read a bit of Adewale Ademoyega. But the first thing is that it was 7 people planned the coup. Of those 7, 6 were majors. Of those 7, 6 were Igbos and 1 Yoruba. Where he got his own Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, and he's trying to do Wazobia of nonsense. The coup of July 29, have you ever said is Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, and all other ethnic groups in Nigeria? You know, people just do these things because they hate the idea of responsibility. Let's read Adewale Ademoyega very quickly. I won't answer everything because I still want to read back onto self before we go today. Where should we even start? Let's start with what he said about what Okafor did. By the way, for Yoruba, especially, read this book. It's not everything there that is correct, but read it. Why does it say it's not everything that's correct? Because he will only write what he knows. There are things he did not know, and it's natural, it's normal. And the ones he did not know, you get those things in another book, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's start here. At about 2300 hours, a group of officers were assembled at the military quarter of Major Ifajuna at Apapa. This included Babatunde. Please, if you don't have the name of the person you are mentioning, please stop typing in the comment section. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. Let's stay with that blessing. Stop disturbing comment. I have an uncle that was a soldier. I don't care. The one that's talking right now, who knows whether he was also carrying gun all over the place, lying to all of us. I beg. If you don't, he said Adeleke. He said Adeleke. Oh my sure. He said Adeleke. Okay, I will address it. But why not ask the question? Why are you saying like you know what I say? Anyway, I will answer you. Let's finish this one first. Oh my sure. Let's be careful with my uncle said, my father said. Your uncle said what your uncle thought. Anyway, with all due respect to our elders, but some of them like this, I know your uncle was probably just telling you what he thought. This one is telling us lies, but I'm sure your uncle is not like him. Let's read a few more things, then we'll go to that Adeleke bit. At about 2300 hours, that's 11 p.m., a group of officers were assembled at the military quarter of Major Ifajuna at Apapa. Babatunde, please stop. I've given you enough grace. Reading it in 1999 does not mean it. Kilo man shawa yo by Efara Bale. You have spoken, Abi. Then calm down. At about 23, I mean, I respect you. You have read the book. Just hold on. There's no one book that contains the history of everything in Nigeria. There's no one book that has everything that's inside that happened in the coup. There's no one book. The best you can do is, if you can find a book that refers to many books, and the truth is, I haven't seen any in the market, and they've told me to write one, so I'm working on something. But there's no one book, so I'll read from the other ones. They will put everything together. So let's work together. Let's not antagonize each other. Thank you, and let's go. At about 2300 hours, that's 11 p.m., a group of officers were assembled at the military quarter of Major Ifajuna at Apapa. This included the officers who took part in the planning of the coup, namely Ifajuna, Anuforo, Okafor, Chukwuka, and myself. I'll read it slowly. This included the officers who took part in the planning of the coup, namely Ifajuna, Anuforo, Okafor, Chukwuka, and myself. There are two names he did not mention. One was in the north. The other one was right there in the room. I'm going to tell you when we get there. So the man is mentioning the names of people there. I don't know if you heard Adeleke. It says here at about 23. I'm just laughing because the way we are very serious with what we do. Anyway, at about 2300 hours, a group of officers were assembled at the military quarter of Major Ifajuna at Apapa. These included the officers who took part in the planning of the coup, namely Ifajuna, Anuforo, Okafor, Chukwuka, and myself. With us were a number of young officers, captains, and subalterns who had only just been summoned. They had only just been summoned from the officers' mess for the operations. Not more than two of them had previous knowledge of the operation. One of these was a staff officer working with Ifajuna. Let's use the opportunity to answer about today's questions. Number one, you saw the names you wrote here. Ifajuna, Anuforo, Okafor, Chukwuka, and Adewale Ademoyiga. Those were the 5 majors in Lagos. The other major is the one who coordinated the coup in the north. That's Nzogu. The interesting thing is this. He mentioned that around 11 p.m. they gathered many officers, and many of them did not know what they were even getting involved. He said not more than 2. The man was specific. Not more than 2 of them had previous knowledge. And he says of these 2, one was a staff officer working with the Ifajuna. The other was a subaltern working with Major Okafor. Who was the one working with Major Okafor? We have his name, by the way. We have to travel a bit. First, let's visit our Telegram channel. I said this last week. I think it's important that we read this document. Let's read to you who those people were. By the way, if you read this book, you will walk away with the notion that this man was part of the planning of the coup from the very beginning. That's what he thought. And he wrote it in his book, and we have read the book. This book was published in 1985. He wrote it about himself. But there's another document that was published in 1966 that has a bird's eye view, seeing everything that even he did not see. That document is called the Special Branch Report. And it was produced after the interrogation of 200 people that were part of the coup. I'll read something to you from there, and I'm going to read something to you from Bengule's book, Nigeria's 5 Majors. Let's go. We're coming back to Ademoyiga. This is what that document says. In August 1965, 3 officers, listen, Major Okafor, Major Ifajuna, and Captain Oji. That's the only name we didn't find there. Could he be the person that was with Okafor? Could he? Actually, he's the one. But how do I know? I'll tell you later. Let's just read this one first. In August 1965, 3 officers, Major Okafor, Major Ifajuna, and Captain Oji, who were already dissatisfied with political developments in the Federation and the impact of these developments on the army, held series of discussions between them about the matter and set about the task of searching for other officers who held views similar to their own and who could eventually be trusted to join them in the enterprise of staging a military coup d'etat. In September 1965, Major I.H. Chukwuka, that's Humphrey Chukwuka, of Nigerian Army Headquarters, Lagos, was persuaded to join the group of conspirators. Followed in October 1965, Followed in October 1965 by Major C.I. Anufuro, that's Chris Anufuro, also of the Army Headquarters. Major C.K. Nzogu was brought in around that time. Around which time? October. Was brought in around that time through the efforts of Major Anufuro, an old friend of both Majors Nzogu and Okafor. Major Nzogu in turn secured the support for the plan of Major Adewale Ademoyega, who had worked with him in the Nigerian Army Training College, Kaduna. The last person to join the group of the coup plotters was Ademoyega. He was the last. Himself and the penultimate person, that's Nzogu, were revolutionaries. We're going to change the country. We're going to change Nigeria. So the gentleman here said there were many Yoruba people that were part of the coup. And he said that he mentioned one name, Adeleke. I've not forgotten. We're going to go back and discuss that name. Okay? So don't worry, we're going to talk about it. He mentioned Adeleke. But it was wrong. And he is wrong. And how do I know that? Because he mentioned a book, and he said he read that book in 1999. And I respect the fact that he has read it, because most people who tell us to read the book have never read it in their lives. So I respect the fact that at least he has read it. But I'm not sure he got the right information from the book. So rather than argue about it, we're going to visit the book together. Here it is. At about 2300 hours, this is Adewale Ademoyega's book, Why We Struck. At about 2300 hours, that's about 11 p.m., a group of officers were assembled at the military quarter of Major Ifajuna at Apapa. These included the officers who took part in the planning of the coup, namely Ifajuna, Anufuro, Okafor, Chukwuka, and myself. I don't think Okafor, Chukwuka, Anufuro, or Ifajuna sound like Yoruba names. And like I said earlier, there were 6 majors that planned that coup and 1 captain. 6 majors, 1 captain. 5 of those majors were in Lagos. 1 major was in the north. That was Nzogu. And then there was a captain who has not been named just yet. So he mentioned the names of those who planned the coup and who were together in Lagos at this particular, moment. Ifajuna, Anufuro, Okafor, Chukwuka, and Adewale Ademoyega himself. With us were a number of young officers, captains and subalterns who had only just been summoned. Underline that. They had only just been summoned. They were not part of this thing. I'll underline it in my own book. Who had only just been summoned. Alright? It says, with us were a number of young officers, captains and subalterns who had only just been summoned from the officers' mess for the operations. In other words, they didn't know about it. Not more than 2 of them had previous knowledge of the operation. Not more than 2. One of these was a staff officer working with Ifajuna, and the other was a subaltern working with Major Okafor. Who were these people? Were they Yoruba people? I would say no, because I know they are not, but maybe you think they are. We'll answer that. The one working with Okafor, who was that person? So, like I said earlier, we're going to go to the Telegram channel, Redomi Global, and I'm going to show you something which is very important. Like I said, it's a document that if you really are interested in understanding what happened in the coup, you have to read that document. It's called the Special Branch Report. It was published April of 1966, 3 months after the coup. And that document is a product of the interrogation of about 200 people connected to the planning and execution of the coup, which included military and even civilians. Having said that, let's go and read that document now. In August 1965, 3 officers, Major Okafor, Major Ifajuna, and Captain Oji Olop, He mentioned Okafor in this book, Ademoyega. He mentioned Ifajuna. He didn't mention OG, but he said that was the captain of subaltern working with Okafor. We'll come back to that later. In August 1965, 3 officers, Major Okafor, Major Ifajuna, and Captain OG, who were already dissatisfied with political developments in the Federation and the impact of these developments on the army, held series of discussions between them about the matter and set about the task of searching for other officers who held views similar to their own and who could eventually be trusted to join them in the enterprise of staging a military coup d'etat. In September 1965, Major R.H. Chukwuka of Nigerian Army Headquarters, Lagos, was persuaded to join the group of conspirators, followed in October 1965 by Major C.I. Anuforo, also of the Army Headquarters. Major C.K. Nzogu was brought in around that time. What time? October. Through the efforts of Major Anuforo, an old friend of both Majors Nzogu and Okafor, Major Nzogu in turn secured the support for the plan of Major Adewale Ademoyega, who had worked with him in the Nigerian Army Training College, Kaduna. When? Around the same time in October. Just so happens to be the same month that Azikiwe left Nigeria. The recruiting activities of the group were completed, and an inner circle of conspirators emerged consisting of the following officers. I would even say that it was not brought in until November. Ademoyega came in early November because it was a final recruit, so to speak. It was the final person that was recruited to the group. I'm not the one saying this, I'm reading a book, by the way. By early November, the recruiting activities of the group were completed and an inner circle of conspirators emerged consisting of the following officers: Major C.K. Nzogu, Major A. Ademoyega, Major E.A. Ifajuna, Major C.I. Anuforo, Major R.H. Chukwuka, Major D. Okafor, Captain O. Oji. Of these 7, how many are Yoruba? That's why, with all due respect to people's uncles and fathers, I don't care what they said to you. With all due respect to them, because they don't, I mean, I will take their opinions if they align with reality. So my uncle told me will not help a lot. Planning for the execution of the coup started in earnest in early November 1965 at a meeting of the inner circle, which took place in Major Ifajuna's house in Lagos. When we come back, we'll talk about the plan that emerged, the real plan. We'll talk about that later. Before they said planning go as a group in November, Azikiwe had used offer, according to Baba, offer, escape. Now, we had Okafor, we had OG. Who is OG, and why is his name not mentioned in this particular document? I thought you wouldn't ask. Let's go to Nigeria's 5 Majors by Bengbule. I remember you mentioned Adewale. Sorry, that's his name? Adeleke. You mentioned Adeleke. We're coming back to that very soon. Let's quickly visit 5 Majors. Please listen to this. This is from Bengbule. By far, the most formidable obstacle between the coup executors and success was the unanticipated element of treachery that manifested itself in the course of the nocturnal operation. In that regard, and to begin with, both Major Don Okafor and Captain Ogbo Oji, the latter of whom was Ironsi's kinsman from Umuahia, are taking a stand against any step that might embody the killing of Ironsi. The very same man who at the most crucial stage of the operation called out the troops of the 2nd Infantry Battalion with orders to quell the rebellion. It was, to say the least, too much of a coincidence that while the 2 would-be assassins, talking about Okafor and OG, it was, to say the least, too much of a coincidence that while the 2 would-be assassins were pointedly making for the GOC's residence, hoping to apprehend him, he himself was at the same time heading towards Ikeja to enlist the support of the personnel of the said 2nd Battalion with a view to quelling the coup. Obviously, someone must have tipped off the superior officer. OG and Okafor were together, When Adewemega mentioned it, that there was a subaltern working with Okafor, he didn't mention the name. Well, we found the name here in Bengbuli's book. And it just so happens that those two were among the original three that started planning the coup. And one of those two, Oji, happens to be from the same hometown as Ironsi Umaya. And just as Ifajina is from the same place as Azikiwe, Oji is from the same place as Umaya, as Ironsi. And he says here, I'm not the one saying, no, this is Bengbili. He says it is too much of a coincidence that while this would be assassins were going to Ironsi's house, Ironsi himself was leaving the house. And someone must have tipped him off. And he called it the element of treachery. So here's the question. So what happened to Okafor? Well, we don't have all the time here, but quickly, he had gone to Memalari's house, trying to kill Memalari. Memalari gets out of the house, hides in the shrubs around his house, 11 Thompson Avenue, Ikoyi, and then sees Ifajina driving past, and it was like Ifajina was supposed to be like his one of his assistants, so to speak. So he reached out to him like, my guy, they won't kill me, my guy, they here. That one now looked at him, carried gun, shot him, and killed him there. So what happened to Okafor? Let's go back to Adewale Ademega's book. By the way, before I go to what happened to Okafor, there's a name that they wanted to mention. I don't know whether I forgot. They used the word Obienu. Jesus Christ. I work on law. What if I told you that Obienu knew about this thing before he started? If I have the time to talk about what Ojukwu and Obienu actually did in the supposed quelling the coup, you'll be shocked at, you know what, let me read something to you from Obienu. 2 officers were conspicuously absent from the gathering. One was Major Obienu, commander of the 2nd Reconnaissance Squadron based at Abeokuta. He had been briefed well in advance and was supposed to attend this gathering so that after the address, he would proceed to Abeokuta to bring his armored vehicles to back up our Lagos operation. It was thought that he might yet turn up, and we kept our expectation of him alive. The other was a young captain who, at the first light of day, was to fly in a special plane to Calabar to effect the release of Chief Awolowo. He too had not turned up, and we expected that he would do so later. If you look at the basis of their coup, whatever they're doing, they said they're going to, deal with the corrupt officers, and then they're going to release Awolowo. The person that was supposed to go to Calabar, something happened, it was not available. The one that was supposed to go to Enugu, something happened, he couldn't leave until around early in the morning. The one that was supposed to come from Abeokuta, Major Obienu, is the one they now give the praise like he was the one that destroyed the coup plotters. He was part of them. He was. You know what? We're not going to go into the deep stuff. Let's just do this surface killing today, because they just lying to everybody. Mumbo. Oh dear. Okafor. Yeah. Let's quickly see what Okafor said happened. The Okafor that was part of the original guys. Again, this book is Why We Struck by Adewale Ademega. He says, I went out to look for Okafor's group. In fact, let me go back a bit. I was at the Federal Guards officer's mess, Ikoyi. Close on my heels came Major Anuforo's group. They had accomplished their own tasks. Having arrested Colonel K. Mohammed, Lieutenant Colonel Unegbe had resisted arrest, and in the scuffle, he had been shot. Next came Major Chukwuka's group. We can discuss that later. Excuse me. Next came Major Chukwuka's group. They had accomplished their own task also, having arrested Lieutenant Colonel Pam. After them came Ifajina's group. They too accomplished their task, having arrested the Prime Minister and the Federal Finance Minister. In addition, as they were returning to base, they saw Brigadier Memalari escaping from the attempts of the Okafor's group to arrest him. They, the Ifajina group, wanted to arrest him, but in the scuffle he was shot. Is a lie. They didn't want to arrest him, they just killed him straight. There are other books that confirm that, but that's not today's topic. Anyway, it's just confirmed that they killed him. I went out to look for Okafor's group. Who is I? Adewale Ademoiga. Who is Okafor? One of the original coup plotters. I went out to look for Okafor's group. I met Okafor himself coming from the Federal Guards barracks. What has happened to you and what have you achieved? I shouted at him. I have just lost my command, Okafor said slowly. The news sent cold sweat through my spine. I almost shivered. Oh no, what have you done wrong? What's all this about? I spoke to my RSM just now and he nearly shot me. He said the GOC had been to the barracks. Which GOC? The GOC that you were supposed to go and kill, who left at the exact same time you were going inside his house? Who just left Gowon at the party in Mimalari's house? As a matter of fact, Gowon was leaving him in that same Thompson Avenue. You find that in the book by J. Samuel Ligo, Gowon, the biography of a soldier statesman. Let's keep reading. It says, I spoke to my RSM just now and he nearly shot me. He said the GOC had been to the barracks. I did not meet him there. Explained Okafor. What? Did he escape from you? I asked. I went to his house to arrest him. I found that he was not there. He had not yet returned from the party. Which party? I asked. Everyone had left the party since 9 last night. No, it was another party. He had been to another party after Mimalari's party. Now he had been in here. He commanded the troops not to take any orders from me and none of them would obey me now. In fact, they were ready to shoot me. It was shocking. It was horrible. If we could no longer use the federal guards, what troops could we use? Where were the men? Which was the force to rely upon? Why was it that your own group did not achieve anything? I asked Okafor. No answer. I returned to the main group at the officers' mess. Okafor came along with his bad news that General Rossi had not been found at home when he went there. He said he had gone to another party. Anyway, that was what Okafor achieved. What Okafor actually achieved was working with OG to tip off Rossi. Just a failure. But here's the crazy part. Now to answer the final thing you mentioned, Babatunde. You said Adeleke, have you? So let's go back to that book one more time. Then I'm going to read something to you from another Yoruba man that was there. I'm not reading because he was Yoruba. Just like I did not read Bengule because he was Igbo. I just had to mention Yoruba because you kept saying that there were other Yoruba people there. Give me a second. The name of that person is Fola Oyewole. He wrote a book called The Reluctant Rebel. Okay? Alright. I'm going to read an interview that was granted by Fola Oyewole. He published a book, The Reluctant Rebel. And it will tell you how Adeleke got involved. But before I read this thing, you know what? I'm going to come back to this. Let me read what Fola Adeola himself said. Sorry, Fola Oyewole. Fola Adeola is not a soldier. All right. So the interviewer asked a question. It was on the allegation that you were among the people that planned that coup that you were detained by the federal government. We want you to assess the situation then that really prompted the military to strike. Here's his answer. I was not one of the master planners of the coup. It will interest you to know that by 11:30 on the night of January 14th, 1966, I had no clue about the coup. No clue whatsoever. So why did they link you? Answer. Precisely, I was friendly with Emmanuel Ifajuna, who was a brigade general, and then after they had planned and done everything possible, as the saying goes, some of the people who agreed to what they had agreed decided not to take part. It is a matter of getting anybody who could help, and by virtue of my position, I had a telephone in my house, which was the same thing that happened to most people there. The original planner started telephoning. Where are you? I want to see you. It was an emergency period. I was second in command to the transport brigade in Apapa and we were on 24-hour alert. So like they would say something like this. Something is happening in Ogbomoso, blah, blah, blah. Can you help out? We did get instructions 24 hours. It didn't come as a surprise. So that is what happened. They drove to my house at about 25 minutes to 12 and asked me to come to Ifajuna's house. I got there and I saw a lot of officers sitting down. And they had even finished what they were talking about. And they said, you stay and I will brief you. Does that align with what Ademoyega said? Let's check. He said, at about 2300 hours, a group of officers were assembled at the military quarter of Major Ifajuna at Apapa. So the same place. Okay. These included the officers who took part in the planning of the coup, namely Ifajuna, Anuforo, Okafor, Chukwuka, and myself. With us were a number of young officers, captains and subalterns who had only just been summoned from the officers' mess for the operations. Not more than 2 of them had previous knowledge, and those 2, one was the Fajuna, the other was OG, working with Okafor. So the other Yoruba, the one you mentioned, now let's ask him, how about Adeleke? Let's ask him, because he said we have to look for the Adeleke bit. He says you were at a point, according to your book, with Captain Adeleke, another Yoruba soldier. Who was he? The answer, he was a colleague. He is the one who said he wanted to consult the family, and we were friends. We both worked in Apapa before the crisis. What do you mean consult family? Let's look at the place where he actually talked about consulting the family. He says, I was not the only one. This is Fola Oyewole. I was not the only one. There are some other people who didn't know until that day. For instance, the night people were briefed, a colleague was in the briefing and he told them, look, I have to consult my family. They looked at him and said, okay, go and consult your family. Just by the corridor, they told somebody, follow him. Maybe he will be the first casualty of the coup. Of course, what do you want him to decide? So simple, the gentleman is still alive today. Who is that gentleman? Adeleke. Your uncle was wrong. He mentioned him by name. Says he's the gentleman I was talking about, Adeleke. He also did not know about the coup. Ademega said these people did not know about it. One other person confirms that a lot of these young people did not know about what they were getting involved in. And it's the book again by, what's his name again? Ben Boulier. Like I said, I'm going to have a full session on that video of lies, and then I'll take it one by one. But for now, by the way, that would be he wrote about him in this book as well. He was part of the whole thing. And then at the particular point, towards the end of everything, now switched. He now worked against them. They now give him credit for being the one that really stopped the coup. But they knew about everything together. I'm going to read something to you from this book now. The man started by saying there were Yoruba, there were Hausa, there were Igbo. Just a bunch of liars. Why can't you just take responsibility for something in your life? Agbalagba, don't you langba. I found it. This happened to an Igbo officer, by the way, a young Igbo officer who also did not know. He says, even more unfortunately, the junior officers who had gone along with the plotters had not been properly briefed, which was for fear that the secrets might be leaked to the authorities. The net result was that those junior officers who would otherwise have proved immensely useful were made to tag along blindly, with no clue as to what precisely the whole military operation was about. One of such junior officers was Lieutenant Gibson Ayafulu of the Signals, Apapa. According to him, he did not even know that a coup was in progress, although he himself actively, if innocently, involved in its prosecution. On the very night, I'll take that again, although he was himself actively, if innocently, involved in its prosecution. On the very night of the operation at about 100 hours, that's 1 a.m., he was woken up by the BM of the 2nd Brigade, Major Emmanuel Ifajuna, the same person who had reached out to Fola Oyewole. And he was told to get dressed immediately because there had been an emergency, and hence the need for an internal security operation. Incidentally, the military push had coincided with Lieutenant Ayafulu's 6th week in the Nigerian army. He had therefore only little knowledge of the loaded Sten gun which Major Ifajuna had thrust into his hands. In fact, he had not been amply acquainted with the mechanics of weapon handling as a whole. Later on, he was taken by Major Wale Ademoyiga to the P&T headquarters in the Lagos Island and left there with instructions to proceed to paralyze all the vital items of the communication equipment inside the building. He set to work at once, without bothering to find out why. Indeed, without asking any questions at all. Then, having completed the assignment, he did nothing else but to wait for his superior officer to return. He waited long enough to become irritable. Finally, as dawn was breaking, he caught a bus back to Apapa. Listen to this. It was not until he was arrested shortly after his arrival at the officers' mess, Apapa, that he realized that they had just taken part in a botched up military coup. just like it happened to Fola Oyewole and Ganiu Adeleke. So all of this to answer just one question from this. And so we'll have a full session on this video. The point is that if a Yoruba person, you have heard this nonsense, it's a lie. I don't care if the person telling you has grey hair in his eyeballs. The person is a liar. I used to say the person was right, maybe they're ignorant. It's not about ignorance anymore. It's about intentional propaganda. Because how can an old man start a speech by saying Igbos, Yorubas, Hausa, and other ethnic groups were involved in the planning of the coup? As if he's talking to his family members. People can be sharing this among their family members, just be lying to themselves, but on social media, Abba, realize that they are just taking part in a botched up military coup. Just like it happened to Fola Oyewole and Ganiu Adeleke. So all of this to answer just one question from this. And so we'll have a full session on this video. The point is that if a Yoruba person, you have heard this nonsense, it's a lie. I don't care if the person telling you has grey hair in his eyeballs. The person is a liar. I used to say the person was right, maybe they're ignorant. It's not about ignorance anymore. It's about intentional propaganda. Because how can an old man start a speech by saying Igbos, Yorubas, Hausa, and other ethnic groups were involved in the planning of the coup? As if he's talking to his family members. People can be sharing this among their family members, just be lying to themselves, but on social media, Abba. No, it's a lie. So, Babatunde, I hope you got the point now. There was no Yoruba apart from Adewale Ademoyiga. And you said you read the book, which is okay. Maybe you should check it again. You probably, but at least we read it together just now. And we've answered that question. Now let's move on. We're good, Abby? Thank you.